Well, hey there. You've stumbled upon the intersection of internet quandaries and psychological insight. Welcome to Veritas Views on AITA, where the quirks of the internet meet the expertise of Veritas Psychology Partners.
Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Michael McBride, and I'm joined by our dynamic duo.
Hi, I'm Dr. Gayle MacBride, and I'm joined by a psychologist whose wit is only matched by his intellect.
Hey, thanks for that, Gayle.
I'm not sure if it's a compliment or not.
Exactly. It could be bad. Yeah. As always, I look forward to your thoughtful insights, Dr. McBride.
Welcome, both of you. For newbies out there, if you don't know what Am I the Asshole is, in short, someone posts a scenario and asks readers, who's the asshole here? That's what we're going to help determine. Neither Dan nor Gayle have read or seen this before, so let's go. Today's prompt begins with the headline, Am I the asshole for naming my kid my sister-in-law's animal name?
What?
I know, it kind of made me laugh.
I'm waiting on the name. I hope he or she gives the name.
I hope it's not 3.
Or buttons. Is it going to be buttons? Like, because that would make you an asshole for an entirely different reason. And my apologies to any listeners who have named their children Buttons.
All right, well, let me read you. It's rather short. So this one just says, I like the name my sister-in-law gave to her animal, and I did not name my first daughter that same name since her pet already had the name. I recently gave birth to my third child, another little girl, and I decided to name her my sister-in-law's pet's name. I announced it to the whole family, but now my sister-in-law is pissed at me for not letting her know about it before. Says I could have contacted her beforehand and let her know about my decision as a sign of respect. I'm not sure I did anything wrong here, and I'm not fully understanding her being annoyed about a simple naming. Am I the asshole here?
Okay, first of all, naming is never simple. Any parent out there knows this is not simple. But barring that, so the question is this person the asshole for not contacting the sister-in-law before deciding on a name? That's the question, right? Like there's many points and opportunities here for being an asshole, but the writer's question is whether or not they're an asshole for not contacting the sister-in-law ahead of time. Did I get that right?
I think it's twofold. One, for using the name, but then also for not reaching out ahead of time and say, hey, I'd like to use this name. Can I have your permission or something? I don't know.
Oof. I mean, right off the bat, like communication here is a bit. I just don't have like you name your kids what you want to name your kids to some degree. Like, I saw the reaction. All right.
Oh yeah, no. I totally agree. I actually think we fall into this, and we see people holding back and not sharing the name because somehow we feel comfortable commenting on other people's name choices. How many times have you talked with someone in your office where they're like, I'm not telling anyone the name, including maybe your therapist, because you don't want to hear the feedback, and their comments can actually, deter you from something that maybe you were really, kind of had your heart set on.
This is one of the many areas that I hear from pregnant women, especially, like, and parents in general. Yeah. People just feel like because they have had children, they have the right and opportunity to give you feedback and tell you what to do about your own parenting and your own child rearing. And I think that these are deeply personal decisions, what to do about stuff. And you get this constant barrage often of, well, you should do this or don't do that, or this is the right way to do it. And it's like, especially for young new parents, it can be overwhelming at times.
Oh, I mean, it's hard enough just to narrow the field down and then let alone have to take that amount of feedback of a choice. I think I understand. I totally understand why parents don't share the name and wouldn't communicate it with anyone. Now, that being said, if you're choosing a family name, is there some, especially a name that someone else in your family has already given, is there some respectfulness that one might show by having a conversation? Let's say, you have two kids in the family and, both love a particular name. One uses it first, but the other had wanted to use it. Do
Right.
you then, so here's a great example. Actually, my mom grew up in a family, her father's name was John, and it was kind of important to him not to have a John Jr., but to have a John. So he named his son John. To continue the lineage, said child named John grew up and always wanted to do the same, not have a John Jr., but to name John. His sister had children, but way before him, and named her first son John. We have so many Johns in this family. We have to use middle names to keep things straight, still to this day. But it kind of feels like the same thing. Like the sister, I suspect, knew that the brother wanted to use the name, but went ahead and used it first. Would it have been respectful for the two of them to have a conversation, or does she have the right to just go ahead and use it? Because, it's not like anybody owns the name John.
Yeah, it would have been. And at the same time, like now I'm going, oh gosh, because I realized that I just dissed all the people out there, told other people what to do. And I remember 25 years ago, a friend of mine who was a fourth, and he was a fourth with a first name Sylvester. And he didn't go by that first name, but I'm like, okay, your wife's pregnant. Like, what are you doing now? And he was like, I'm not going to make this kid a fifth. The name Sylvester didn't work out for me too well over the course of my life. I just don't want it to be my kid's name. And but I remember telling him, oh no, you should do this. You should do this. So here I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth.
Wow.
Because
we grow and mature in our recommendations. You're saying this happened 2.5 decades ago.
Perhaps that's the case. Maybe I've grown in today. I would hope that I wouldn't be like, but of course he was barraged with this question throughout his wife's pregnancy with their first child. Like, are you going to name, are you going to go for the fifth? Are you going to do this? And I don't know. We didn't talk about whether there's any family like pressure or anything like that, but there is so much of that so frequently, whether it's out there or not. And, for the first question, like I'm already there with like, you don't have to tell people ahead of time what you're going to name your kid. Like
absolutely. Yeah, no, that is a deeply personal decision. Nobody owns the rights to any names. I mean, I suppose unless you copyright it somehow, but that would be a highly unique situation.
But I remember myself with naming my youngest son, not my youngest daughter, my youngest son, because I had sort of picked out a name, and then like a good friend of mine, groomsman at my yeah, well, not go down that path.
Anyway. Leave it there.
Yeah. But I mean, he named his kid what I was going to name my kid, and I was like, I mean, we didn't discuss it ahead of time. What?
Did he know your name?
No, he had no idea.
Okay.
He had no idea, and I was like, well, I mean, do I name my kid because I mean, he was on his way. So like, it was like, they're like a couple months apart, and he got there first, and like, do I name my kid the same name as my good friend from high school who I've been known for almost 50 years, or at that time, almost 20, almost 30 years, but do I name him the same name, or I pick a different name? And, I really like that really kicked around in my head a lot about whether or not to choose. And I ended up choosing a different name. I can't imagine, my son going by any other name now. And that name seems weird to me now as his name, but like it gave me a lot of pause for thought.
Yeah, understandable. I'm with you. I don't think that you owe anybody an explanation for why you're going to choose the name. I think it's hard enough as parents, especially if you're really working with another person, if you have two parents in the picture, to agree on a name. I mean, we went back and forth and used some rules and agreements just to be able to navigate it, peacefully. Because we had some pretty strong opinions, as you might imagine.
And it can be a
variety of names.
It is hard enough to navigate that naming thing just between a couple, let alone dragging in other family members by sharing with them what you're thinking about. I fully support not talking about it with others if you don't want to. I mean, if you want to, fine, whatever.
If you're willing to take the feedback, right? You have to know that sharing it comes with a risk.
Now, what drives me crazy about this one, unfortunately, is because of the nature of the internet and people's desire to be anonymous, is we don't have the name.
Yes,
like I want to know the name. Is it like Joe or Steve or Susan, or is it something like, Buttons, or, Tater Tot,
Well, right. Yeah. No, you don't know. And I think more unfortunately here is this parent's choice to name a child in the family where the pet is known. But there, the foil to that is the pet's not going to stay with the family nearly, hopefully, as long as this child, right? That name will be that child's name, and then the pet probably won't have that same legacy.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's like a forgetting the parrot or something like that, the parrot
Oh, yeah, right.
70 years. But like if it's a dog or a cat, chances are it ain't gonna make it past the kid's teenage years at the most. That's a terrible thing to say, maybe. I don't mean to be
Maybe,
callous to pet owners, but that's just
by mathing this, the pet's been around a while because the pet was already in the family at the time of her first child, and this birthing parent is disclosing this is at the time of their third child. So just by some math here, this animal has been in the family for some amount of time and is unlikely to survive, that much longer.
I get stuck on the whole, like, people feeling like they can tell you what to do about your, like, so like quick, like when my oldest was newly born, we had this doctor, old Doc Gordon, and Doc Gordon, his wife was his receptionist, and his daughter was his nurse, and this is a small town in Southern Virginia, and well, Doc Gordon, came in the room, and he's like, I just got to tell you something. You're gonna get lots of advice from lots of people about what to do with your kids. You make your own decisions and do your own thing and smile and nod a lot. And I thought that was really great, and I did that to him once or twice too. I'll be honest. I smell okay, thanks. But I think that we want to do some research, but like in the end, it's the parents' decision on how to do this, and sometimes we decide we don't necessarily want all that extra feedback from people, especially when it's about something like a name. We're not talking about a medical decision here, or a life and death decision. We're talking about like what we're going to call the kid, and I just don't think other people should have that much input or feel like they should have that much input.
So I think we sort of agree that the person is not an asshole for keeping the name quiet and wanting to name whatever it is that they wanted to name. And I think the other question is whether or not they are an asshole for naming it a pet's name. Is that the second question then? And I think, again, we've kind of talked around this a little bit, unless it's Buttons or Snicker or something like that. Like, we give our pets human names, and it's probably I'm going to go out and assume, perfectly appropriate name to name another human being. And again, as parents, within some legal limits, you have the right to name your child what you want to name them. Now, I say some legal limits because I have seen some court cases out there where parents want to name a child something and have been taken to court, and the judge says, absolutely not, that's not appropriate, and is struck down. And those usually make the news because they are names that are really not appropriate to give to a person to have to navigate through life.
Right.
I agree. For so many reasons.
I'm going to agree with you there, but I mean, would it give me pause for thought if I really love the name that a close family member had for their pet? It would definitely give me pause for thought. But in the end, you're not an asshole for picking your kid's name, and I struggle more with everyone's belief that they have a right to have an input into this very deeply personal decision between the parents.
Yeah,
So.
I would agree. I 100%. She's thought about this. I mean, obviously, she didn't go forward with the first kid. She's had some time, years, to think about this name, and she's clearly attached to this name, and it's important to her. I understand that. I have some names that I had picked out for my children, and I feel an attachment to it. When I hear someone with that name, I automatically have a little bit of affinity for that. Mm-hmm. And so I totally understand the birthing parents have the right to name whatever you want to name. Be thoughtful about it. If you feel an attachment to it, go ahead. Mm-hmm. It would have been lovely if there was a relationship there enough to have had that discussion with the sister-in-law. That's a bit of an interesting nugget that we didn't talk about to even bring that up. but I think she took the appropriate care and concern in choosing the name. And I think the sister-in-law is not appropriate in expecting to be informed, consulted, or have any input whatsoever.
Right. So I don't think and I don't think anyone is really terrible here. I get the sister-in-law's consternation. I think, to be honest, I think that's one of those things where you get annoyed by it, and I think the right course of action for the sister-in-law is to maybe be a bit annoyed. Just keep it. I mean, this may be a controversial take, but sometimes you just keep your annoyance to yourself and take a deep breath and say, I'm not happy about this, but this isn't worth family strife over. Let's enjoy and celebrate the birth of the child, and let's be happy about it. Let's not ruin this, or not ruin it, but let's not cause problems for mom and dad. So, like, I think the sister-in-law's role there is to be quietly annoyed and complain about it with her partner or other people, and just let that go.
I couldn't agree more. And I do wonder a little bit why the sister-in-law is so annoyed by it. I have a couple of pets at home. If one of my sister-in-laws turned up and said, hey, we really loved this name and we've chosen it for our child, I'd go, wow, that's really cool. Okay.
Yeah.
In which one are you referring to? And I assume if you're speaking about that name, then you're probably referring to your version, your human version, versus my feline version of the name. Like, I don't think it would be that difficult, and I don't understand why the sister-in-law is quite that annoyed. But I agree with you. If she is annoyed and she has a right to be annoyed, that's fine. Sit on it, stay quiet. You are probably the only one that's annoyed. Again, unless it's Buttons.
Yeah, and honestly, if you and Michael choose to have another child, and you want to name it CJ, name that child CJ. I'm good with that. I don't think
I appreciate that. Thanks.
I thought you'd appreciate that. Yeah.
So normally I would jump in here and ask for your ruling, but you've basically given it there. It sounds like you started pretty firmly on the side of not an asshole, but then kind of as the conversation went on, maybe there are no assholes here. That the sister-in-law has some right, or am I misunderstanding that, Gayle? I'll start with you.
I don't think the sister-in-law is an asshole, but I think she doesn't come out smelling quite the rose either. I wouldn't say no assholes here, but I think asshole is too strong a term for the sister-in-law. I think the birthing parent, she's within her rights. She gave it some careful thought. I wouldn't make the same decision, but I don't think she's an asshole.
Yeah, and I'm this time in complete agreement with my esteemed colleague. I probably wouldn't have picked the name, but she chose it. It's her business. I probably would be annoyed. Not annoyed. I wouldn't be annoyed. Let me say that differently. I get that someone can be annoyed at this, but again, I'd keep that quiet. I'm fine. I'm fine with her being mildly irritated, but I also think she should just chill about it. Everyone here should know. And the mom, like, it's her choice. So it wouldn't be my choice, but it's her choice. So fine.
Yeah. Sure. Well, you probably won't be surprised that the internet mostly agrees with you. I mean, going through the comments, almost everybody was very staunchly not the asshole for the reasons of you don't own the name. There are only so many names in this world.
I don't know. There's a lot of names.
There's a lot of names. There's only a certain number of names you might like,
Yeah. Several of them made the same comment about the child will hopefully outlive the pet, unless they use the example of a Galapagos tortoise. I liked yours of the parrot. That's a good one as well.
I don't know. The tortoise is a strong example.
Tortoise would be a strong pet. That would be quite the pet to have in your house.
The one most thoughtful, I think, dissenting opinion was that the original poster comments that she liked the name immediately, but didn't use it for child 1 or 2. And so clearly knew something about the family dynamics that might rock the boat. And then when she got around to child 3, really should have had that conversation with the sister-in-law, because she was anticipating a problem immediately, and then later in life made a different decision. And so that conversation wasn't an obligation, but it certainly would have eased things over. No?
I
Okay.
disagree with, I mean, I think that has too many assumptions in it. I mean, was the assumption that choosing the name was going to rock the boat, or was the assumption that choosing a pet's name might be less than ideal? Like, which part of that, is it about the personality, or is it about choosing the name?
Yeah,
And I don't know that we can assume that.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with that person as well. So sorry, we don't have much. We usually we have some disagreement here, Gail.
Yeah, no, it's not terribly
Wow.
interesting.
Wow.
We're
So no,
falling down the same side of this.
I love the nuances of your conversation though that come out. And unfortunately, you're absolutely right. She never reveals the name, much to the chagrin of the people on the internet as well.
Oh, I'm
Um,
sure there are a lot of
we
like, what was the name? What was the name?
that so many of the info requests were, what is the name? How unique is it?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So
In my
um,
head, I'm just choosing to believe that it's buttons. I'm sure it's not, but I'm just choosing to believe that it's buttons. And she still gets to pick her if she wants to name her kid buttons. I think it's a bad idea, but well,
I love
Name.
a lot of the posts who asked for info then shared examples of names like their pets. And one of them, of course, references Indiana Jones. Well, we named the dog Indiana, which made me laugh. So there's
Oh,
that.
that's a fantastic example. I had forgotten about that.
that is a great example. Indiana, the dog. I would do my best Sean Connery here, but it would just disappoint. So I'll leave
Okay.
that. Believe
And
that.
I do terrible accents. So I will leave that as well and just say thank you both very much for another riveting debate and a glimpse into the collective conscience of the internet forums. Remember, morality is often shades of gray and not just black or white.
Truth can be stranger than fiction. Stay true
That's,
and stay strange.
thanks so much for listening. Join us next time as we wade through another interesting Am I the Asshole thread.
Please follow and share Veritas Views on any of the podcast platforms with your neighbors and friends. And as always, stick around through the credits for the bonus conversation about the seemingly random items in the therapist's office and the stories behind the objects.
You can follow Dr. Dan Kessler at Dr. Dan Kessler and Dr. Gayle MacBride at Dr. G. MacBride. Oh, and you can find them both at veritaspp.com. Credits. Tickling the Ivories, Matthew Reddington. Art, production, and design, bringing this show together with flair and finesse, Michelle Love. Recording and editing, turning chaos into something worth sharing, Michael MacBride. Intro, outro, I'm Kelly Buttrick, a VO talent who just happens to be Dr. MacBride's cousin. Cats, CJ, Linus, Sadie, and Griffin. Hosting by whomever lost the coin flip. Interruptions by all their children. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapist-client relationship. If you believe you may be experiencing a mental health issue, please seek the assistance of a qualified mental health professional. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call or text 988 from anywhere in the U.S. to be connected to Crisis Mental Health Services.
Thanks for listening. As promised, here's the bonus conversation.
Ooh, okay. Dan,
Yes.
in your office, I would love to hear the story of the teeny tiny trash can. Have I asked you about this?
So I can tell this. Yeah, sure. So there is a very small trash can in my office, and it's about, you can't see my hands probably in the podcast, but it's like 3 inches wide, 6 inches tall, and it looks like one of those rotating large trash cans that you see with a spinning top,
Spinning crap. It's hilarious.
Yeah, the reason for that is that people often cry in a therapist's office, and when you walk into a therapist's office, you're going to find comfortable chairs, a window, tissues, and that and a clock. Those are going to be, you're always going to find those items: comfortable chairs, tissues, window, and a clock. People are crying; they want to throw the trash can in my office was under my desk and kind of hard to access. So I would reach under the desk, grab it, and put it over the thing. And I asked our wonderful admin at the time, like, could you get me a small trash can to put next to the desk or next to where my clients
table.
sit. So when they cry, they have a place to throw their things. And I was just thinking about a regular office trash can, and this little tiny, adorable, cute little trash can thing showed up. And I think in the 8 or 9 years it's been in my office, someone's actually put a tissue in it once because it just looks more decorative than anything else.
Ask how it got emptied. Like, who's responsible for that?
Well, I found it. I'm like, oh, someone must have used this because I found a tissue in there. I had no idea how long it had been in there. So, but that's why that little tiny, adorable, cute trash can was there. So, one of these days we need a web page for this, so you can put pictures like this on the web page. Maybe like a picture of that little trash can will be great. But yes, that's why the tiny, useless, relatively useless, adorable trash can is there.
Only used once.
Only, as far as I know, it might have gotten used more than that. I should check inside it and see if there's any tissues, because
it's like a bad suggestion box at those companies that post them and then don't actually look at the suggestions. Like,
that is exactly it. Like, you would never think, oh, I should actually put a tissue in here after blowing my nose or crying, but that's. And I never had the heart to tell the person who got it, like, this is really not adequate, because it just seemed like they had put effort into it.
You haven't removed it from its place either. No. You haven't decided this is useless. I'm not going to have it here. So no, ask you about
it. I just smile at it from time to time. It amuses me to have it there, so I just leave it there. And I still, to this day, if you're in my physical office, will reach underneath the desk and get the trash can and lean over and set it next to the person who's crying and has the tissues. So
next time I'm in your office, I'm going to make a point of throwing something away in that.
I'm going to look at it. Yeah. There's the story.
All right.
I love it. Thanks so much for tuning in. Tune in next week for another Am I the Asshole debate. Have a good one.
We love hearing from you, so please review us on Apple, Spotify, or, well, wherever you're listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please review, like, and follow. Also, give it a share. This helps us reach more listeners.